Roboute Guilliman, also known as the Avenging Son, is the Primarch of the Ultramarines. An accomplished warlord and diplomat who ruled his own empire before rediscovery by the Emperor, Guilliman was unique among his brother Primarchs in that he saw himself as not only a warrior but also a builder of civilizations. In addition to his leadership of the largest space marine legion during the Great Crusade, Guilliman became renowned for his efforts to preserve the Imperium in the aftermath of the devastating Horus Heresy, becoming Lord Commander of the Imperium. Among his most noteworthy achievements is the authoring of the Codex Astartes and the creation of the modern Imperial military structure. Shortly after the 13th Black Crusade, Roboute Guilliman was restored from his wounds, and now once again leads the Imperium as its Lord Commander and Imperial Regent, the living voice of the Emperor. Like the other Primarchs, Roboute Guilliman was one of 20 genetically engineered sons of the Emperor of Mankind. Like his brothers, Roboute was taken as an infant by the powers of chaos, and removed to a far-flung world in an effort to prevent the coming age of the Imperium. The infant Guilliman's capsule fell to Earth on Micrag, where it was discovered by a group of noblemen hunting in the forest. Inside the capsule they found a child, surrounded by a glowing aura. He was taken back to Conair, one of the two consuls who governed Micrag, who adopted the infant as his son and named him Roboute. Roboute's arrival on Micrag was a portentous time, and many reported strange sights. Most notably, Conair dreamed of the Emperor, and found himself beside Heros Falls in the valley of Laponis. Upon awakening, Conair assembled his bodyguard and rode to Heros Falls, where they found the child. The name Conair gave the child, Roboute, means Great One. Guilliman would also be raised by Conair's seneschal, Tarashar Uten, a strong-willed and capable woman. Roboute was a prodigy, growing fast in both body and intellect. By age 10, he had mastered every subject the wisest men of Micrag could teach him, and his insights into matters of history, philosophy, and science often stunned his elders. However, his greatest talents were as a military leader. These talents led his father to give him command of an expeditionary force to Illyrium, a mountainous region in the far north of Micrag, whose wild inhabitants had terrorized the civilized regions for years and successfully resisted every previous military campaign. Not only did Roboute fight a brilliant campaign, but he also earned the respect of the wild men who never again threatened the more civilized parts of Micrag. While the history books state Guilliman militarily subdued the Illyrians, the reality was more complicated. Rather than engage in a protracted mountain guerrilla war, he simply occupied the Illyrian sacred shrines. This caused the Illyrians to surge forth to meet his armies, but rather than crush them then and there, he challenged their chieftain to battle. During the duel, Guilliman only defended himself from his foes' blows, but never launched his own attacks. The chieftain eventually exhausted himself, but rather than slay his enemy, Guilliman instead presented him with the Illyrians' most sacred religious artifact, which centuries before the consuls of Micrag had stolen. Guilliman's act of diplomacy and humanity convinced the Illyrian chieftain to halt his campaign, seeking to become a just lord like Guilliman instead. At this moment, Tarashar Uten realized Guilliman had proven himself a true king. On his return to the capital, Roboute found the city in chaos, as his father's co-consul, Gaulan, had attempted a coup. Gaulan led a faction of Micrag's nobility who were used to enjoying their wealth and position at the expense of armies of slaves, and resented Conair's legislation favoring the common people, among whom he was immensely popular. Approaching the city, Roboute and his soldiers saw the city in chaos, being sacked by mobs of Gaulan's men, while the consul house was under siege. Roboute left his men to restore order to the city, while he rushed to the consul house and lifted the siege, only to find his father close to death, surrounded by his loyal bodyguards. He had been mortally wounded by an assassin in Gaulan's employ, and with his dying breath, told Roboute who was responsible. Roboute swiftly crushed the rebellion and assumed the title of sole consul of Micrag amid a wave of popular relief. He set about punishing the treachery and carrying out his father's vision. Gaulan and his co-conspirators were executed, and their lands and wealth were redistributed to the people. With superhuman energy, Roboute reorganized Macrag's entire social structure, creating a meritocracy where office and honors were given to the hard-working, rather than the wealthy and influential. Under his leadership, Macrag prospered as it never had before. The arrival of the Emperor. While Roboute was prosecuting his war against the Illyrian rebels, the Emperor of Mankind and his armies reached the neighboring planet of Ispander. It was there that the Emperor heard stories of the extraordinary son of Consul Conair, and realized that he had found one of the lost Primarchs. However, due to an unexpected warp storm, his ship was thrown far off course, and by the time it reached Macrag, Roboute had been ruling for almost 5 years. When the Emperor reached Macrag, he found a world that was self-sufficient, prosperous, with a strong and well-equipped military, and engaging in trade with nearby systems. Impressed, the Emperor assigned command of the Ultramarine Space Marine Legion to Guilliman, and relocated the Legion's forward base to Macrag. The Great Crusade. With the exception of the Lunar Wolves, no Legion conquered as many worlds, conquered worlds as fast, or left conquered worlds in such a good state during the Great Crusade, as the Ultramarines. Whenever Guilliman liberated a world, he would not move on until he had set up a self-sufficient defense system, and left advisors behind to create industry, set up trade routes with the rest of the Imperium, and form a government whose first concern would always be the well-being of the people. At the same time, with the help of his new advisors, Guilliman created a supremely efficient military machine on Macrag and its surrounding worlds, that provided the Ultramarines with a steady flow of new recruits. This factor, combined with the minimal casualties suffered thanks to Guilliman's tactical skill, allowed the Ultramarines to become the largest of all the Space Marine legions. When Horus was appointed Warmaster by the Emperor, the reaction among the other Primarchs was mixed. Some supported the appointment out of affection for Horus, some opposed it, and some were cynically accepting. However, Guilliman, Rogel Dawn, and Jagatai Khan supported the appointment, believing in their cool, rational judgment, that Horus was really the most worthy of them. For this reason, and because of their military genius, Horus valued Guilliman and Dawn as his closest advisors. Privately, Guilliman held 4 of his brothers in the greatest esteem: Dawn, Sanguinius, Leman Russ, and Ferrus Manus. He referred to them as the Dauntless Few, and pronounced that he could win any war, outright, if he had any one of those 4 in his legion on the Ultramarines side. Conversely, relations between Guilliman and Lorga became miserable after the Emperor had the Ultramarines destroy Monarchia, and be present during the shaming of the word-bearers. While Guilliman carried out these orders to the letter and appeared to be firmly supportive of the Emperor in front of Lorga, in truth he was uncomfortable with his actions and upset that the Emperor used his legion as a tool for humiliation that drove a wedge between the Ultramarines and word-bearers. The Horus Heresy. At the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, Guilliman and the Ultramarines were tricked by Horus, who sent them to the Viridian system while Horus carried out his treasonous plot. When the treachery was revealed, the Ultramarines were poorly placed to react to it. While the Ultramarines mustered their forces at Calth, in Ultramar, they were attacked by the word-bearers and the Legion took heavy losses. However, the word-bearers had overlooked 2 major points: the unbreakable fighting spirit of the Ultramarines, and the brilliance of Guilliman's command. An attempt by Lorga to assassinate Guilliman with a demon who attacked the bridge of his flagship forced Guilliman to be sucked into space, and fight several word-bearers without a helmet. Guilliman was eventually able to reboard his ship, and promised to hunt down and kill Lorga for the betrayal. At the climax of the battle, Guilliman ripped out one of the 2 hearts of Cor Ferran, the word-bearer's commander at Calth, after he had tried to tempt Guilliman to join the forces of Chaos. Meanwhile, Angron of the World Eaters and Lorga of the Word-Bearers had launched the Shadow Crusade on isolated worlds in Ultramar. Their plan was to destroy as much of Ultramar as they could while the Ultramarines were occupied on Calth. After the victory at Calth, Guilliman, presumably under the guidance of his newly reinstated librarians, traveled to an isolated warp jump point on the outer fringes of Ultramar. There he encountered Sanguinius of the Blood Angels, who has just recently finished his war in the Cygnus cluster. The navigators of the Blood Angels had been ordered to find the closest stable warp zone, which many assumed would be Terra. Instead, fate brought them to Ultramar. With the addition of the Blood Angels to his forces, Guilliman pronounced they could finally begin countering the Shadow Crusade. After Calth, Guilliman pursued Lorga, who had since allied with Angron, to the world of Nuceria. There, the Ultramarines engaged both the World Eaters and Word Bearers, while Guilliman himself battled Lorga, finding the once weaker Word Bearers Primarch to be surprisingly capable in combat. The situation for Guilliman got worse when Angron arrived, battering Guilliman with a furious assault and eventually defeating the Lord of Micrag. However, as Angron was about to land the final blow, Ultramarines were able to arrive and safely retrieve their Primarch. As a result of being cut off by the ruined storm created by the traitorous Word-Bearers, Guilliman feared the Imperium lost and created a second empire, Imperium Secundus, as a contingency. Many loyalist brothers were brought to Micrag thanks to the activation of the Xenos device known as the Pharos. Not wanting to appear vain and power-hungry like his brother Horus, Guilliman refused to declare himself Emperor of Imperium Secundus, instead initially trying to convince Lion L. Johnson to take the position despite being distrustful of the Dark Angels Primarch's motives. While organizing the creation of Imperium Secundus, Guilliman survived an assassination attempt by an Alpha Legion squad, disguised as Aenid Till and other Ultramarines. Later, when Conrad Kurz was let loose upon Micrag, Guilliman and the Lion battled the Night Lord's Primarch together, but were led into a trap. Instead of being cornered, Kurz detonated charges and brought the entire structure down upon their heads. Guilliman and the Lion survived thanks to Barobus Dantiuk activating the Pharos, which teleported the duo to Sotha. The Lion and Guilliman then made their way back to Micrag, where the Blood Angels had now arrived. Guilliman decided to name the reluctant Sanguinius the regent of Imperium Secundus. However, Guilliman frequently clashed with his distrustful and taciturn brother Lion L. Johnson over policy. Obsessed with hunting for Conrad Kurz on Micrag, the Lion insisted that the Night Haunter was behind rebellions plaguing the world and demanded martial law be instituted. After a suicide bombing hit an Astartes convoy on Micrag, the Dark Angels were deployed by the Lion to establish martial law without Guilliman's express permission. Guilliman and the Lion again came to a disagreement over the rebellion in the Illyrium region of Micrag, with the Dark Angels Primarch wishing to use weapons of mass destruction to flush them out as he suspected Kurz was hiding there. Ultimately, the Lion led the attack into Illyrium, and Kurz was captured. At Guilliman's insistence, he was given a public trial. During the trial, Kurz accused the Lion of ordering secret orbital attacks against the rebellion, which enraged the Dark Angels Primarch, and nearly led to him slaying Kurz in the court. Guilliman and Sanguinius dismissed the Lion from Imperium Secundus in response, but later the Lion reappeared and asked to be Kurz's jailer instead. Following the trial of Kurz, Sanguinius, Lion L. Johnson, and Guilliman all agreed to try and breach the ruined storm to reach Terra and aid the Emperor, who they now knew still lived. In the ruined storm, the Loyalist fleet came across a variety of horrors and words of an entity spreading destruction known as the Pilgrim. During the voyage through the ruined storm, Guilliman's fleet was ambushed by traitor forces at Annuari, where the Avenging Son survived an assassination attempt by word-bearers armed with athames. Believing he could study the weapons for understanding the enemy and potentially using it against them, Guilliman kept the blades in his vault. During the Battle of Pyrrhon, Guilliman commanded the Ultramarines personally as Sanguinius received a vision, and he realized that he needed to go where this struggle had begun, Davin. Reluctantly, Guilliman and the Lion agreed to trust in Sanguinius, but both had thought they would simply destroy the world upon arriving. While over Davin, Sanguinius shocked the Lion by boarding the Invincible Reason and taking the captive Conrad Kurz with him. Sanguinius hoped to use Kurz's prophetic abilities to determine what he was meant to do upon Davin. Sanguinius then commended a mass landing on the world, and the enraged Lion nearly ordered that Davin be subjected to exterminatus regardless of Sanguinius' presence on it. After horrified Lion expressed to Guilliman that he believed something was trying to manipulate them to the path of damnation, the Ultramarine Primarch knew what he must do and crushed his captive Athame blades with his power fist. He declared he would not be tempted the same way Horus had. At Davin, Sanguinius was trapped within a portal and did battle with the demon Medael while Guilliman and the Lion desperately tried to reach him. A vicious battle erupted both on Davin and above it, in which Guilliman's acting flagship Samothrace was destroyed in orbit by the demonship Veritas Ferrum. During the battle at Davin's temple, Guilliman and the Lion managed to finally fight as brothers, and together they brought down a massive soul grinder. Eventually, Sanguinius was able to escape and the Space Marine forces evacuated to space. Davin was destroyed by cyclonic torpedoes, and with its anchor gone the demonic fleet vanished. In the place where Davin once was, a breach in the ruined storm was visible. The path led to Terra, but upon further study, it became apparent that somehow Horus had foreseen this route, and a large blockade was erected to block them. Guilliman and the Lion agreed to distract the blockade while Sanguinius and the Blood Angels made directly for Terra, for that was their destiny. After the death of the ruined storm, Guilliman gathered whatever forces he could and made haste for Terra. In his path lay a large defensive chain of hundreds of worlds manned by the Iron Warriors. In a series of bitter engagements, both sides took heavy losses, but the Ultramarines were able to maintain a steady advance. Ultimately, Guilliman was able to set course for Holy Terra. Traveling at maximum speed, his legion was only hours away along with several other legions. This ultimately decided the Imperium's fate when Horus was forced to gamble by letting the Emperor teleport onto his battle barge. Post-heresy. In the aftermath of the Great Betrayal, the Emperor had been incapacitated, and the Space Marines' numbers had been decimated by defections to chaos and battle losses. The Ultramarines were left as the largest loyal legion, and Guilliman assumed the title of Lord Commander of the Imperium. For years thereafter, Guilliman deployed and led the Ultramarines throughout the galaxy, reclaiming worlds lost to chaos and preventing the loss of still others to rebellion or invasion from outside the Imperium. At the same time, Guilliman reorganized the Space Marine legions as chapters and composed the Codex Astartes, the tome that the Ultramarines, and many other chapters, follow strictly. Guilliman led the assault against the Alpha Legion on Escrador in the aftermath of the heresy, and due to the vanity of Alfarius, he utilized a surprise attack at the heart of the traitors and killed Alfarius in a duel. However, he and the Ultramarines were greatly mistaken in their belief that the snake would die without the head, as indeed, the Alpha Legion's symbol is a hydra, a multi-headed serpent. The Ultramarines were soundly pushed back time and again by the traitor Marines, undaunted at the loss of their Primarch. Guilliman eventually pulled his forces back into orbit and bombarded the planet from above. Sometime before the Battle of the Sala, Guilliman tasked the tech priest Belisarius Call with two deeds: the resurrection of Guilliman should he fall and the creation of a next generation of Space Marines. Later, in the Battle of the Sala against the Emperor's children, Guilliman would be grievously wounded. Where Alfarius had not greatly embraced the Chaos powers, and was essentially unchanged from his original Primarch form, Fulgrim had been to the Eye of Terror, reaping the terrible powers therein, and had been elevated by Slaanesh to a mighty and fell demon prince, no longer resembling a man, but his original purity of form corrupted and augmented by the ruinous powers. Fulgrim was now a serpentine creature of immense stature, and multi-limbed. Each limb carried a poisoned sword, and in the clash he stabbed Guilliman in the neck. Guilliman was interred in the stasis field by the apothecaries, and remains frozen in the instant of death, while Fulgrim escaped back to the Eye of Terror. For the next 10,000 years Guilliman's mortal body remained in stasis, on the shrine of Guilliman deep within the Temple of Correction, one of the holiest places in the entire Imperium. Some pilgrims claimed that the Primarch's wounds were slowly recovering, a feat credited to the power of the Emperor. Others deny the phenomenon, and point out the sheer impossibility of change within the stasis field. Yet enough believed the stories to come and witness for themselves the miracle of the Primarch. Awakening. Shortly after Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade and the destruction of Cagia, the tech priest Belisarius Cawl and Saint Celestine led a group of Imperial survivors into the Webway with the aid of their new Eldar allies. The group arrived at Macragge, where Cawl revealed that he had in fact lived for the last 10,000 years, and was ordered by Guilliman himself to complete 2 tasks in the event of his downfall. One of these was to revive Guilliman, a feat that Cawl could now accomplish thanks to Eldar aid. Using a suit of power armor that regenerated the wounds inflicted by Fulgrim, Guilliman was restored just as Black Legion forces invaded Macragge. Reborn, Guilliman swiftly drove off the Chaos invaders before taking in the troops of the Imperium after his 10,000-year absence. Guilliman displayed several miracles after his rebirth. His mere presence was able to cure any afflicted with a Nurgle-created blindness-inducing illness. Disgusted by the decay, superstition, and ignorance surrounding the modern Imperium, Guilliman convened a war council of his Ultramarines on what to do next. After several days he declared his intent to travel to Terra and see his father on the Golden Throne. However, Guilliman's revival had attracted the gaze of the gods of chaos and demon Primarchs, throwing the warp into an uproar. The journey to Terra, known as the Terran Crusade, became an arduous affair that saw his fleet trapped in the Maelstrom after an ambush by Magnus and his 1,000 sons. Inside the Maelstrom, Kairos Fateweaver and the Red Corsairs defeated the Imperial expedition, with the Primarch himself trapped in crystal chains made from his own doubts. Held by Kairos inside a Blackstone fortress, the Imperial expedition seemed doomed. However, thanks to the efforts of the Harlequin Salandri Veilwalker and the fallen angel Cypher Guilliman, and the rest of the surviving expedition were freed and escaped towards a Webway portal. Guilliman held the portal long enough for his men to escape, defeating the bloodthirster Skarbrand after witnessing the sacrifice of Marshal Amalrich. The Imperial expedition eventually arrived through another portal on Luna, but this time was followed by Magnus and his 1,000 sons. On the surface of Luna, Magnus and Guilliman dueled as the battle raged around them. Guilliman was overcome by Magnus' psychic abilities until the arrival of reinforcements from Terra that included Sisters of Silence. With Magnus' psychic abilities weakened, Guilliman was able to impale his demonic brother and force him back into the Webway as the gate was sealed. Regent. Afterward, Guilliman landed on Terra and gained access to the Emperor's throne room inside the Imperial Palace. Guilliman stood before the Golden Throne alongside Captain General Trajan Valoris, and the Emperor awoke for the first time in millennia. In a surreal experience that Guilliman cannot fully remember, the now nearly inhuman Emperor told him that he was the last hope to save mankind, and brutally assaulted his mind with dark truths about the galaxy and its history. What exactly transpired is unclear. According to Valoris, Guilliman spoke in silent psychic conversation with the Emperor for several minutes, while Guilliman remembers falling to the ground in agony. Moreover, only minutes seemed to pass for the two, but when they emerged it had been over a day. Regardless of the truth, Guilliman emerged with a new determination. He gathered the High Lords of Terra and declared that the Imperium would be reorganized and rearmed under his leadership in order to confront the coming threat of chaos. With that, Guilliman declared himself Lord Commander of the Imperium once more. He later declared himself Imperial Regent, the living hand of the Emperor. One of his first major acts as Lord Commander was to defend Terra itself against the forces of Khorne in the Second Battle of Terra. Guilliman subsequently declared the Indomitus Crusade to reclaim the devastated worlds isolated from Terra by the Great Rift. The campaign was waged for the next century, as Guilliman acted as Supreme Commander and Chief Administrator of the Imperium. He simultaneously oversaw vast campaigns spearheaded by Belisarius Cawl's new Primaries Space Marines and sweeping civic reforms, which culminated in the Codex Imperialis. As the Indomitus Crusade wound down, he rushed back to Ultramar to protect his sons from the onslaught of Nurgle. During the Plague Wars, Guilliman survived an assassination attempt by Mortarion, Typhus, and Kugath on Parmenio. Guilliman was nearly cornered in the trap but was saved by the efforts of a mysterious young girl that seemed to be a powerful living saint. The Plague Wars came to their dramatic conclusion on Ajax. Guilliman learned of the plot being enacted there by Mortarion and Kugath through interviewing a captured demon host, much to the objection of his tetrarch Decimus Felix, his Eldar liaison Ilian Nates, and the Grey Knights. Despite knowing he was walking into a trap, Guilliman decided to nonetheless confront Mortarion on Ajax. On the Blighted World, the two came to blows. Guilliman was able to hold his own for a time, but was eventually defeated by the demon Primarch's warp-enhanced might and resilience. With Guilliman disabled, Mortarion administered the deadly phage known as the Godblight, which was capable of even killing a Primarch. Guilliman remained defiant as he succumbed to the disease, refusing Mortarion's goading to give in to Nurgle in order to have the pain end. Seemingly dead for a time, as his spirit hung in balance, Guilliman experienced a surreal vision of his reunion with the Emperor upon his return. The vision makes it clear that not even Guilliman truly knows what transpired in the throne room that day, save that the Emperor awoke for the first time in millennia. In reality, the Emperor's psychic might flowed through Guilliman, and the Primarch was able to spring back to life, causing a shocked Mortarion to flee before the power of his father. Channeling the Emperor directly, Guilliman raised his father's sword and unleashed a psychic attack that cut into the Garden of Nurgle itself. The mighty blow was enough to damage a portion of the garden and wound Nurgle personally. With that, the Primarch fell into unconsciousness. Guilliman reawoke back in orbit over Ajax, having been evacuated from Ajax by Colquhoun's custodians. He met with militant apostolic Mathieu to thank him for his part in the victory on Ajax, and the priest informed the Primarch that the Emperor was preparing to return. Mathieu died shortly after, and Guilliman would declare him a saint in the aftermath of his heroism on Ajax. Now questioning his former atheism and preparing to move his attention to the Paria Nexus, Guilliman began to probe Belisarius' call for means to bring the Emperor back. After Ajax, he also expressed his intent to leave the Imperium Sanctus and journey into Imperium Nihilus. Thank you for listening to this entry from Warhammer 40,000 Lexicanum.